There are many different ways of how to blend color when it comes to painting, and in this video I'm going to be showing you two different approaches, or at least explaining two different approaches to use. So, okay, let's go for it. There are different videos on YouTube or whatever that show artists of how they approach their way of blending color and all that, and throughout the years of me painting, which I've been painting now for I think 4 or 5 years, something like that. This is a piece I'm working on. It's not finished. There's two different approaches of how to blend color. Either you could put most of your attention blending on the palette and then putting it on the canvas, or you could put most of your attention blending color directly on canvas. When it comes to blending on canvas, you're going to be doing a lot of layering. So you're going to start with a layer of paint, you allow that to dry, you put another layer over top of that, allow that to dry, and then another layer, until you eventually get the achieved result that you want. While when it comes to blending mostly on the palette, basically you just put one layer and that's about it. You can either paint all one layer, where you do most of your blending on the palette, or you put more of your attempts on blending on canvas itself. When you're blending directly on the canvas, you're not going to do it just all at one go. You'll do one go, you have to eventually allow the paint to dry, and then apply another layer over top of that, allow that to dry, then another layer over top of that. For a decent amount of years, I used to use only acrylic paint because acrylics would dry pretty quick. You apply a layer of acrylic paint and it would dry. The problem with acrylic is that it dries too fast. Sometimes you can apply the acrylic on and it dries like right as you put the paint on there, if it's really thin especially. For a decent amount of years, at least when I began, I used to just use only acrylic paint. And I would apply acrylic paint, and the thing with acrylics is that, the nice thing is that it dries fast. The problem with acrylic is that it dries too fast. So with acrylics you have to be very careful. You have to work maybe one section and just get everything done at one go, and then work in a different section and then do it at one go, and then another section. The problem though with that is that after you do all that, you say, wait a minute, this doesn't quite go with that. I got to blend this a little bit different to go with that, etc., etc. And it's pretty difficult with acrylic. With oil paint, what's nice is that it doesn't dry fast. It dries real slow, so it gives you a lot of time to blend. But the problem with oil paint is that sometimes, if you can put oil paint on there, and it'll take it could take 2 or 3 weeks for it to be dried to the touch, for you to then be able to put another layer over top of that. And about like a year or two ago, I ended up discovering the working properties of Liquin. Nice thing about Liquin is that it's a nice medium to add to oil paint, so that you can apply the paint on. You have time to blend it. You have like an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, depending on the thickness of the paint or whatever. But then after a few hours or after a day, it dries to the touch. Like this right here, this yellow, this was done with oil paint, but with Liquin. After about a day, it's actually been sitting around for about 8 hours. It's dry to the touch. I mean, like for instance, if I'm going to be working on a particular mountain, you take the brush or whatever, and then if you're going to do it I put a little bit of paint on there. Actually, I could show you this. See, when you apply, this paint's dry, and then when I do that, you can see how I altered the effect of it. And you can make the paint more opaque, or you can make it more transparent. With this painting, right now in this certain stage, I'm only going to be working with 3 different colors. I'm going to be working with burnt umber, ivory black, and titanium white. And my palette is right behind me, and I'm going to give it a go, and so yeah. Okay, I got that taken care of. I use these 2 brushes, my palette knife, and even sometimes my hand or my finger in certain areas to get the blending effect. In this certain stage, all I used was ivory black, burnt umber, and titanium white to achieve the certain effects that I wanted, at least for this stage, with this mountain and then the horizon. There's many different ways of how to blend color and all that, and all that kind of stuff. This is a painting in progress, and this is just one stage. I'm going to allow this paint to dry, and then I'm going to eventually do other different things to it. I'm not exactly sure how the whole painting will come out, but it'll come out decent, I guess. So anyway, as I tried to explain before, to oversimplify, there's two basic approaches of how to blend color when it comes to painting. You can either do it directly on the canvas, that's where you put most of your attention directly on the canvas, or you can put most of your attention on the palette, which this right here is just the used cutting board. Hey, anything will do. I got another palette. All it is plywood. Hey, it works. I've never been able to be the type of painter that I do most of my blending of color directly on the palette and then put it directly on canvas and it comes out looking good. With painting, there are different sort of skill sets you need to have. You need to be able to draw. You need to be able to understand form and other things like that. Along with that, you also need to understand tone, which is different from color, and then also color, of course. So there's different sort of things you have to look at. And with me, I paint in stages like this because it works for me. I would give you a demonstration of me doing most of my blending on the palette and then putting it right on the canvas, but I don't have that skill set, and that's not something that I actually like doing anyway. I prefer painting in different sort of stages. Okay, so here's one painting. Let me show you some other different ones. Okay, here is another painting I was working on. The paint is still a bit wet. I used an acrylic sort of paint to provide the grounding of it. That was the first layer, and then I used it. After that dried, I used acrylic paint to get the general outline of the bison, along with these sort of abstract effects, and then sprayed it with water, different things like that. Allowed that to dry fully, and then today I used oil paint to put on top of the acrylic, at least with this animal and then around the animal. And that's the stage right now. And then I'm going to allow that to dry and then add different layers until eventually I get the desired effect that I want. All I used with this, well, to begin with, this was the house paint that I put on. It's different sort of colors that I blend in and put it on, allow that to dry fully, and then I apply the oil paint on. Titanium white, burnt umber, and ivory black. The first layer, first stage with the oil paint. I use the brush, only this brush right here, and I use basic broad strokes to get the basic outline of it, and then I allow that to fully dry overnight, and then I got smaller brushes to get more detail in, and as you can see, this is still a work in progress. Okay, this is another painting that I was working on. You can see I'm getting different color and all that. Working in layers and stuff like that to eventually get the desired effect that I want. So, yeah. With the sky, I actually blended a cobalt blue with titanium white to get that effect. I did not use a glazing effect. In a short period of time, I'll explain what a glazing effect is. With paint, you can either make it more transparent or more opaque. Opaque means you can't see through it. Transparent means you can see through it. And you can tint the color of a paint, either more yellow, blue, or whatever sort of desired effect that you would like to achieve. When it comes to oil paint, or even acrylic paint, any sort of paint, if you want to achieve like a glaze or a wash sort of effect, a glaze and a wash is basically the same thing. What you do is you have less paint with the pigment, and you add a medium to it in order to get it so it's more transparent. And you can even add mineral spirits or certain paint thinner as well. But of course, you don't want to add too much mineral spirits or paint thinner, because that will you'll basically be eliminating too much binder, so that over time the paint is just going to flake off because there's not enough binder. So and the painting medium has binder in it. With acrylic paint, one type of medium I actually use is Floetrol. I know it's very weird. Floetrol you can get in the painting department. I got it at Lowe's. You mix a little bit of Floetrol, and you can use it for any sort of latex or acrylic based paint. You apply it on there, and then you can apply it. You can get like a certain wash effect. With oil paint, you can just simply use linseed oil. So you have your oil paint, and then you can add linseed oil to it, and you get a certain ratio that you have a nice glaze effect with it. The problem with using linseed oil is that it takes forever for it to dry. I find if you want to have like a certain glaze effect where you apply the glaze and in a few hours it'll be dry to the touch, what I would recommend is you get your oil paint and then you mix it with Liquin Original, and you get like a certain sort of ratio, and then you put it and you want to have a certain amount of Liquin with a certain amount of oil paint to eventually get the certain effect that you want. You want it more transparent or less transparent, but when you mix oil paint with Liquin, your oil paint will dry a lot faster, which, at least for me, for what I do, is really good. Before I really understood the advantages of using Liquin and its fast drying properties, I basically stayed away from oil paint because it just took forever for it to dry. I'm actually one of those painters. I don't like the paint to, like after you're done painting 6 days later, it's still wet to the touch. There's certain oil paints that just take forever for it to dry, and I really, really don't like that. I like the properties that it doesn't dry too quickly. Acrylic paint, you apply the layer, after 5 or 10 minutes, it just dries all of a sudden. You're like, what, So it limits you with what you can do. For instance, here's one acrylic painting that I did. I painted this like last year, I think, and the lighting here sucks, but I'm not going to adjust it or anything like that. It's very flat, and there's certain sort of desired effects I just couldn't do, and also I did this in 4 hours. I actually did it pretty quick, which I guess in my case sort of shows. It was okay, but nothing great. But yeah, with acrylics, there's certain sort of limitations that I can do. You can't quite get the in-depth, look. Especially if you're a tonal painter like me. I take titanium white or black or whatever, or I'll take certain paints and then I tend to overblend, and I tend to blend them in certain ways where I eventually like the effect. There are certain painters that want their brush strokes to show more. I prefer to really blend it, do a lot of blending. Okay, I probably talked too much. Anyway, I think to summarize is this. There are some paintings that I did that are actually finished. That right there is an oil painting. And it's all done and all that. There's another one. Actually, I like that one a lot. This right here is actually acrylic. All this is acrylic. Everything is acrylic. So you can sort of see the difference between oil, how I can blend it in, versus acrylic. That's another one that's acrylic. And that's an oil painting. This is another thing I've been working on as well. This is actually on metal. This right here is metal. The metal has been stabilized onto the wood. So this is wood, and then I put the metal on. I just screwed the metal on, and then did all that other finessing stuff. But this is oil paint that's on metal. So this is another thing I've been working on too. And this border right here, this was originally brown and has a blue tint to it. What I did is I used acrylic paint, but I added a medium to it to create a wash sort of effect so that it made it more transparent, to just tint it a little bit. So it has the brown look, but it also has the blue. So it sort of provides like a bit of like a cold, frosty sort of effect. This is a painting that's intended to be, to sort of give you like a winter type of feel. And it's still in the making process. It's not finished. There's still certain effects I'm going to do and all that, but this is another thing I've been also doing too. So, anyway, I think I'll end it on this note. Stay creative. Or not. One of those two.